So first things first, want to do a bit of round robin for the people on the call. I just want to hear, who are you? What do you do? Why are you here? So I see someone else is joining as well. So as soon as they connect to audio as well, let's go around and we can start with, who are you? What do you do? Why are you here? I can kick us off if it helps. So I'm Josiah Owens. Super excited to just spend some time knowledge sharing and talking with you all this evening around why everyone can design. As far as what I do, my day job is managing staffing operations for one of Atlanta's consulting firms, Slalom. There, I've got responsibility for over 117 consultants of various years of experience and tenure, and really work to partner with our sales team and leadership team to find opportunities that match our consultant skill set and business need. So a lot of it plays into my passion for people experience and how we get to use consultants and business needs and kind of bring those things together to create a pretty cool experience for our people. Before that, though, I had spent several years in the talent development space. I've done everything from project management to actual training development and building those things out. I've done a lot of work in the change management and communication space. I've got a little bit of a technical acumen as well. But outside of that, a lot of the work, again, that I have done in my career thus far has always been people focused and looking for ways to help people work better and help businesses create additional value at the same time. As far as why am I here, obviously, just to chat with you all around how everyone can design. I've got a passion for it. And I think it connects very nicely to how we create experiences for our learners and our workplaces around us. So that's me in a nutshell. I'll pass the baton. Let me go, Laura. You just look like you're ready to share. So take it from here.
Well, nice to meet you. I'm delighted to be here. So my name is Laura Davis. I'm the CEO and founder of Laura A. Davis and Associates. So I started my company in 1995. How about that? Yes, you might not have even been born by then, but I've done a lot of leadership development training programs, and I'm a master executive coach. So we do everything to create better workplaces, essentially, and healthier corporate cultures. So I coach leaders to be more emotionally intelligent. I work with teams to help them be more cohesive. And then I sell assessments, primarily DISC and the 5 behaviors and PXT Select. And the reason I'm here is I've been coaching and training and selling assessments for many, many years. I'm about to sell a very large project and engagement to develop a leadership development curriculum. And the last one I participated in with some of my associates was end of 2018, 2019. So I just want to get myself geared up to really redesign a lot of things and create some new wonderful materials and have it be leading edge. This company that I'm working with is not hybrid. They're face-to-face, so it will be face-to-face, but it's a huge project. So I need to sort of chunk it down, and I thought this would be helpful.
Awesome. Well, glad to have you. Welcome again.
Thank you.
Let's go, Jamie.
Hi, I am Jamie. I'm actually joining from Idaho. So I'm here today because Atlanta shared a code. And so I'm part of another chapter out here and kind of just wanted to see programming from a different chapter. And this topic just interested me because I have over 10 years of instructional design and facilitation background, but I'm recently retired because I live in the mountains now here in Idaho, but retired from that as a pause, but I'd like to move into creating my own materials around coaching individuals. So I thought it was a great time for a little refresher on that conversation. So I'm excited to be here.
Well, welcome. We're glad to have you. Feel free to crash anytime. Love it. Let's go, Allison. I know you mentioned you might not be able to stay, but you're still here, so you
Well,
gotta go.
yes, I wanted to just stop in and say hi. I'm Allison. I'm the chapter president for ATD Greater Atlanta, and I wanted to log in, make sure Josiah was good and that you all had a good program. That's why I'm here. But during the day, I'm an instructional designer, and I write a variety of content for Supply Chain Associates. So kind of wanted to hear a little bit as long as I could stay on, but I'm glad I was able to stop in. Just wanted to say hi to everybody.
Well, hello, and welcome.
Hello.
Thanks again for helping me out.
No problem.
Let's go, Donna.
I'm Donna, and I live in Athens, Georgia. And to plug ATD, we're doing a chapter meeting a week from today. That I'm the speaker on micro learning, which leads to I have a platform. It's called Learning. I'm the director of content partnerships, and we're a small platform, and we're growing content. And I have found myself in the position, sort of accidentally, being content coach. I'm a good writer. I've had some published stuff. I've always taught and sold, but I don't have the structure behind it. So when I got the email from ATD about design, I mean, it couldn't have come at a better time. So I'm no pressure, but I'm really counting on you, Josiah, to really get me to the next level.
Oh, goodness. I'm sweating bullets over here, but it's nice to finally see face. I've had the pleasure of getting to talk to Donna, but nice to see face and meet you here too.
Likewise.
Welcome again. And Neil, I don't know if you're in a place where you can unmute and chat to introduce yourself, but if you can, go ahead, sir.
I'm pretty sure that everyone on this call knows who I am by this
Hi,
time.
Neil.
Hello, everyone. Neil Dowdell. I am the past president for the Greater Atlanta chapter. Also, I serve as a national advisor of chapters. And nice to see you, Jamie. She's one of the chapters up in Idaho that I advise. But great to see everyone, Laura, Donna. And I can't see everybody on my screen. It's coming in. Hey, Allison. But anyway, definitely glad to be here. I am I don't know what I do these days. I do a lot of business
Everything.
developments, instructional design, training and facilitation, an HR consultant. So a variety of different things. I'm just a melting pot of services. So it's great to be here. And thank you, Josiah, for providing this workshop for us today.
Absolutely. Certainly a pleasure.
Josiah, you're in Atlanta, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm in Atlanta, but when you live in Atlanta, you don't actually live in Atlanta. So I'm closer to the Stockbridge, Conyers area, to be
Okay.
specific, for those who
Yeah.
get it.
I
So,
get it.
oh yeah. Certainly excited to be here. Now, I will say, before we get into the nitty gritty and details, I will save my personal design story for later, but want to go back to something that I mentioned earlier about kind of my passion for this area. And a lot of it stems from honestly personal circumstances that I've been in where I've just experienced the effects of maybe poor design, whether it was something I was looking at or a restaurant or an experience that I had been part of that it just felt like it was not planned. There were little details. So I felt like it would be a good place to start for us to maybe unpack what that might have felt like when we were on the receiving end of poor design, because I think that's going to give us a reference point as we look to, one, be better stewards and designers ourselves, but also as we walk into spaces, I think, again, it gives us a good starting point to understand what good looks like and where there might be opportunity areas. So I can kick this one off in terms of an example of being on the poor end of design, if you will. So I remember going to a restaurant. I'd booked a dinner for my fiance at the time, now my wife, but I'd booked a dinner for us. And this restaurant had hundreds of reviews. I mean, people had told me, hey, you've got to go to this place. It's got a great experience. The ambience is going to be great. You have to try it. And it was one of those places that I think had gone viral, if you will, online. So everyone was going. And so I think I fell victim to it and decided, you know what, I'm going to go too. And at that point, all the hype had been built up around it. I was hungry, ready to eat. And I remember we got there, and despite the fact that I'd made reservations, we had to wait an additional 2 hours to eat.
Oh,
So that was the first thing. Outside of that, we then get seated. It takes another 30 minutes for our first thing to hit the table. And from there, it just felt like the night could not have been worse. Like the food portions weren't all that great. And granted, I know at certain places you get what you pay for, it is what it is, but I just expected more, by the way that things were hyped up and the way that it was sold. I thought I'd be in for a real treat. I thought that there had been a lot of planning. I certainly looked at the prices, and based on the experience that I had, it didn't match, and to this day, I have never been back to said restaurant. And me being a methodical person, I started to think after I left, and after the review, I left as well, about what else could have made it go better, right? Was it a staffing issue? Was it a challenge issue? I mean, the ambiance was great. I mean, it had all the makings of what could have been a really great night, but still the experience down to the detail of from the time I walk in to sit down, how much time does that take? What is the attitude of the waiter? What does the recommendation feel like for the food? How did they deal with challenge if there are any issues? Like if those things were really addressed, how would that have made my experience? Would it have improved it? So just wanted to share that as my kind of example of being on the receiving end of poor design. But I'm curious to see maybe if we can come up with a few themes from all of us on the call in terms of maybe when we were on the receiving end. Who wants to go first?
My biggest example, and I'm only saying this because I'm working on a class right now. I have a class called How to Deal with Clients Who Watch Too Much HGTV. And it's all about expectations because, and this, we're all guilty of this, we're watching so much TV that we're not going deep. And so you saw all those reviews. So expectations matching the reality is something that I think we all struggle with. So that's been when I'm disappointed, it's usually because it didn't meet my match expectations, but where do your expectations come from?
I think that's a good one.
I'll make a comment. This is Laura. So I'm designing programs all the time, and you really do need to test them in the real world, right? But when I first left corporate America, I did a lot of contract training with a very, you're sending this out to us, right? A very prestigious training company. And you could always tell who designed it. Some of the things were fantastic and some weren't. And what generally was missing when they weren't fantastic was context. Like, why the heck are we doing this exercise? For what purpose? And then the transitions would be poor or, artificial. And I can remember many a night working, Deloitte was the client, at a fancy hotel with other facilitators saying, how are we going to do this? How are we going to make this work in the classroom with this audience? That kind of thing is stressful.
Absolutely. No, I think that makes sense. Jamie?
Well, my example is recently have participating in a training program, which is a wonderful training program. And I just sat there going, I can't believe you're so successful when your materials are all over the place. So it was like, we got a binder of materials. So there was not lack of materials, but it was a program where you were going to be tested. It was open book later. So there was this whole section at the back with the slides, like copies of the slides, so you could take notes, but that's never enough room, right? And they don't show up right. And then you had to flip back and there was a table of contents, but like it just, you'd be on page 46, but now we're moving to 89 and then we're going to go back to 62. It just wasn't like in order at all. And then so it made going back to take that, even though it was open book, it was still very difficult. And I know it's not supposed to just give it away when you test it, right? But it just was not in a way that
didn't flow. Yeah.
It didn't flow. That's the right word, Laura. There was just no flow. It was, because then if you've had good materials, it just is so choppy. It really just interrupts the learning. So that
was it a big training company? Can I ask Jamie?
What's that?
Was it a big training company, like somebody we would know?
Well, their main business isn't necessarily training. That's not there, but it's a pretty big, they have a lot of good stuff built into it. I'm like, you need to just tap into some instructional designers for
Yeah,
this
yeah,
part
got
of
it.
Yeah.
Definitely can agree. That kind of speaks to the experience that the learner would have as a result of maybe having what could be information overload and things not really being fleshed out in terms of how would someone really digest this? Does it make sense? Is the flow right?
Mhm.
So no, I think that's a really great example. Neil, did you have anything worthwhile in terms of an example?
I would like to apologize, Shaw. I'm in the middle of a crisis with the website problem with the client.
You are
So,
fine,
yes.
sir. Handle your business. Handle your business. It's cool. But no, in terms of themes that I heard kind of managing expectations and reality as being one that can contribute to poor design. For example, I heard lack of context as well as being a contributor. And then lastly, how the flow goes from a end user experience perspective. I mean, I think kind of wrapping it with my example of how all of those things, as they come together, can really just set a customer, a learner, whoever the person is that's on the receiving end up to be disappointed, which is what I think we want to avoid by prioritizing and really being thoughtful of how we go about designing things. So with that, wanted to level set a bit on kind of expectations and what I hope that we all can walk out of this with. And it's really just a renewed focus on what it means to be a designer, whether it's of experiences, of trainings. At the end of the day, someone is going to step through what we put together. And so I'd like to think of it as experiences. But two, I'm hoping that we can relate it back to the things that we're all going through in terms of challenges that we might be having. I know several of you spoke to either things that you're selling or working toward. So my goal is that you'll be able to leave here, hopefully able to more systematically apply what you hear and maybe what you've heard from others to what you're doing to be more effective. So I will say this is also not a Photoshop or graphic design workshop. We don't have enough time for it, but again, I'm hopeful that we'll all leave learning how to be better stewards and designers in our own right. So that then leads me to another question. If you can't guess, I love to ask questions because I think it just helps us all get context around what does design mean to you? So you can take 15 seconds, think about it, and let's talk about it. Okay, I think we're ready. Who wants to go first?
I have a design story for you. Like
Oh, come
design
on.
should make your life, it should be beautiful and useful. Like it should
Okay.
appeal to us. So I remember I was in a very nice hotel in Boston taking a shower and I couldn't figure out how to turn the water on. It had such a sleek, modern
Yeah,
design
been
that I had to
there.
actually call the front desk.
Yeah.
Now it was beautiful, but because I'm reasonably intelligent, I've taken a shower before, it wasn't my first one, I should have been able to figure out fairly easily. So they put too much emphasis on design and not enough on function. So the design should serve a purpose and
Absolutely.
engage you and make you feel good.
Absolutely. I think that's a great call out on the usefulness piece, because sometimes people can get lost in just how it looks, but not how it works. So I love that. What
And
else?
that's kind of where my mind went. Like it's supposed to support the communication of something, or I mean,
Okay.
it really is there to support whatever kind of outcome you're trying to get to in a way that people can receive it. So the same thing,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, it's a shower. She can tell it's a shower, but if you can't use it, like it's not supporting what you would like to help people do at that time.
Yeah.
So yeah. And again, kind of going back to that flow too, right? It just kind of keeps it all together, but is done
Okay.
in a way that the other people can receive the message.
Okay. Laura, what you got?
Yeah, and I would add that it's sort of seamless, it's orchestrated well. And when I'm in that flow, like I keep thinking about a live training, but similarly in a virtual training where people are engaged and they're learning and it feels like it's going someplace, and it's almost like you're not aware of the parts, right? It feels like it's well
It's connected.
connected and time goes quickly and you just feel like, oh, that was wonderful. And I like that you actually used a restaurant experience and that we're using other things other than just a classroom kind of setting, because it is true that you see design everywhere and it should feel seamless to me. Like I shouldn't be aware of the design. Like the shower was a good example.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm aware now, like I have to use this. Do I
Yeah.
use this? Yeah.
No, I think that's a great ad. For me, when I think of design and what it means to me, just from looking at the word alone, it means thoughtfulness.
Mm,
I think of intentionality that goes behind it, whether it's a shower or a restaurant. If I can sense that there was thoughtfulness and it wasn't rushed in terms of when and how it was put together, if it
Mhm.
feels like they literally planned for me to be here, that to me speaks to what good design is. So going back to what I initially said about thoughtfulness, that's probably one of the words that I would use to describe design in general. Which then leads me to think about who are the people behind design. Typically, we call them designers, right? And as I was doing some research on what maybe the formal definition of a designer was, I was intrigued at how the first thing that it mentioned was not necessarily a drawing, but it felt like it was very broad and could apply to everyone, which selfishly supported the topic that we're talking about in terms of everyone can design, which I was happy about too. So let's unpack the definition of a designer. And that is a person who plans the form, the experience, the look, or the workings of something before it's being made or built, typically by drawing it in detail. And I would maybe adjust drawing to writing it, capturing it, getting it somewhere in detail. And as I started to look at this person and kind of how they're defined, I really thought about experiences for me where I've either played the role or um, wanted to help inspire someone else, because I think the misconception about design is that not everyone can do it, or you have to go to the certain team, the XD or the graphic design team to do it, or um, someone else is just better at it. And while I think that everyone is gifted and has certain expertise in certain areas, I think we all owe it to the people we work with, to our organizations, our clients, to give them something to work with, to give them some inspiration, if you will. And so with that, kind of curious from the group to understand when we've stepped into the role of designer, perhaps in our past. If we think about this definition, being someone who plans the experience, the workings of something before it's been made or built, when have we stepped into that role? So put on your thinking caps, go back in time with me for a second to the first time you designed something. Now, what I need y'all to do is paint the picture. What was going on? What were you trying to do? Like, tell the story of what it was, and we'll see if we can find a couple of themes. I promise they'll be useful as we go. So maybe you all can take a moment. I can share one that's pretty recent for me. And I think I might have some pictures to support it. So I think that might be even more helpful. So I remember this was 2020. I had just bought my first house, and it was a reno project that I decided after I watched an episode of HGTV, I can do it myself.
Oh, no.
I quickly realized I could not do it by myself and had to phone a friend who happened to be my brother-in-law, who was a contractor. And without question, he dropped everything he was doing, came from Florida to lend a hand. And I had this vision for my home office at the time based on something I saw. I was like, I want a focus wall that's behind me so that I don't have to have a virtual background if I don't want to. I want it to be a conversational piece. I want it to be a certain color. I want it to look custom. Like I was giving him all the things that I at least saw in my head from a vision perspective and trying to relay it to him in terms of how thick things should be, the exact type of color. I even had some pictures as inspiration. And if I go to a picture, let me see if I can find it. So this was the before of a room. This was, I think the previous owner had used it just as a storage room. So this is what it was before. This was the during. And this was the after. And literally from start to finish, I could see it. I knew how the lighting was going to look. I knew what the floors were going to be. I'd literally pieced together all of the detail, even though I had no idea how it was actually going to fully come together. And I think for me, this affirmed the fact that I didn't have to be the one to fully execute it if I could give someone the vision. And that's half the battle that I think some of us face sometimes with design, of feeling like we have to do everything and have all the pieces. Reality is I am not a contractor. This is not my day job. I will not be quitting anytime soon. But I recall last year in 2021, when I had a project in my living room that I wanted to do. And it started like this. And I was able to go back in time to when I had that idea in my head, and my brother-in-law helped me out. And I said, well, I can't call him for this little project. Maybe I can go online and figure it out. Maybe I can challenge myself to do it. So I got the materials, same process as I had before, but this time I said, well, maybe if I get my own nail gun and if I get my own saw, it's a small area, so I can take a little bit of risk here. Maybe it can turn into something pretty cool. And so this is what it turned out to be. So I share those two examples, including me holding the nail gun as proof that
That's
all
really
the-
not proof that you actually did it. That's
I was
just a
gonna
photo.
say, but.
I need recording.
See, all right, I'll make sure I drop a video next time of me actually doing it. Don't worry, I'm gonna do one back here soon. But
Or here's all you got to do, just like put a Band-Aid on one of those fingers and then it'll look like.
that part, I'll make sure I do it. And matter of fact, since Neil made that comment, I'm gonna record when I do a focus wall for my current home office in my new house. So stay tuned, it's coming. But I share those as two kind of stories to show how, one, I was exposed to design from the thought process, the creating the vision, even though I didn't actually execute. And then on the other side, just by taking risk, I was able to kind of see it through from start to finish. So it just kind of shows what can be done if you take some risk and if you are really thoughtful either way, because thoughtfulness did not change in either scenario. They were both the same in terms of being intentional. So that's my story. I'm tired of talking. Someone else go.
Well, I will say when you asked the first time we designed something, the first thing that popped into my head was literally like how I organized my like elementary school desk. I mean, I just was that kid that like I just rearranged it like all the time. But as I think about it, you know, and in relation to your example where like you had the vision and could really communicate that, like, I don't think, I think that's where I struggle some, is that I
Okay.
don't have concrete vision. So I just get in it and like do and redo and redo. And I don't know that I slow down, as I'm thinking,
Yeah.
as I've grown as an adult, I think I still carry this with me. So I'm much more like just in it, like just feeling it out while I'm in it, which is a huge waste of time. I mean, it didn't matter in
Yeah.
elementary school because I could rearrange it every day, like who cares,
Yeah.
but that's not productive for big projects or, things like that. So not having the intention clearly defined so that I could communicate it to someone else to see the vision, I think that's a key piece. And I'm
Yeah.
lacking that a little bit, I think.
So I've got a follow-up question to that. I'm curious, what motivated you to organize it or kind of restructure your desk the way you did?
Well, I think it was one just about like the functionality of being clean or like what I
Okay.
needed to get access to, right? Like
Okay.
what were we doing on Tuesdays? Okay, well, I want to make sure I could just get real quick access to that on
Yeah.
Tuesdays or, whatever that was. So, and probably more just how it felt for me. Like, so I didn't have that vision, but I was just going off of feeling. Does this feel like the stuff's in the right place and it's
Yeah.
clean and organized?
I think it's interesting how you talked about function yet again.
Yeah.
And we talked about it earlier on the call, but function came up as a driver, right? Which I think in hindsight speaks to a bit of the vision, being able to say, I need this on Tuesday for this reason. Like
Mhm.
that makes complete sense. And then also thinking about the feels, I think you were speaking to experience, to how did it make your week flow
Mm.
because your things were organized and you didn't have to play any guesswork. So that's why you were doing it, to make sure that you knew what was where for when you needed it. So there was no challenge or question as to what happened that could have potentially ruined your day in elementary school, because we wouldn't have wanted that, right? So
Right.
no, I think that's a great example, certainly, of what that looked like, and even a recognition of maybe the importance of articulating our own visions too. Donna, what you got?
Well, I'm struggling. This is kind of why I'm in this class, because I'm good at concepts and I'm really good at coming up with ideas, but I'm not great at execution. And so I'm
Ooh.
trying to work on a template right now that I can give my content creators, because a blank page doesn't scare me. I love a blank page. I can fill it up and stuff, but it scares a lot of people. So
Yeah.
I'm designing a template and I don't know how to, like, for some reason I'm stuck on it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not quite sure, but I have the most fun I've ever had designing. So I didn't do it, but I had an architect one time and we were going to put some dormers on our house. So he came over with a big piece of cardboard, picture of our house, and vellum on top of it. So we said, hey, what if we had dormers? And on top of the vellum, he sketched out dormers and I could see it, like his way of communicating with us. And we could just play, like Jamie's talking about. Like, I don't think it's wasting time, because I'm getting off topic, but we as adults
Go
need to
ahead.
learn how to play. And I think design is play. Like I'm the Post-it note girl. I have every size, every color. I have the giant ones on my board because I have to draw it out, but then I can give that to somebody else who can put it into a spreadsheet or a Google form
Yeah.
or stuff like that. Like, yeah, I definitely need support. But I'll tell
I
you,
love your yikes. I need a yikes thing. That's fine.
my daughter made that while we were on COVID, when everybody was out of school.
Yeah.
That is priceless. I love it.
Well, I will tell her that you like it, but I never remember the philosophical idea, but this will take the pressure off. So designs come from the mind of God or whatever deity that you believe. Like a design, an idea comes from elsewhere. So it's wrong of us to believe as mere humans that we can duplicate in reality what the universe has given us. So I think about that at least once a day, because it takes the pressure off to make it perfect.
I think that is fair. There's always room for improvement, and there's a need to be flexible as things change and to iterate. That's how you get better. Love it. Laura, what you got?
Well, can I answer a different question?
Yes, you can.
I think I love design once I start to get into it. And I
Ooh,
do tend to take what I've already done and rework it, because
okay.
I've been doing this for a long time, right? 25 plus years facilitation. And I only do the design for myself. Like I don't love design to give to other people. Although I
Okay.
have associates that we talk through what the design is going to be all the time, right? So
Yep.
what I'm challenged with now is developing this big program when I've done so much stuff over the years and
Yeah.
honing it down to what are the essential elements. I mean, they're timeless, universal coaching, delegation, feedback, and I've got good stuff, but you know, how do you take what you have and make it fresh and new and rethink it? And that's kind of where my brain is around design. And I think for me, really talking it through with people who have fresh eyes is useful
Hmm.
too. Because otherwise, I'm thinking back to how I used to do it. And
Yeah.
part of it's great, but it's a different day and a different audience. So you want to,
Absolutely. No, I
yeah.
don't think that's a bad question at all. I think it speaks to, if I go back to the restaurant example, and I'm sure we've all been the recipients of surveys where people are asking for feedback and what does good look like. How often do we see feedback really truly applied, where not only is it acknowledged, but you see it in the next time that you go and that it's addressed and it's clearly demonstrated. I just wonder if more of us would take the fact that, hey, people are getting surveys left and right. If we actually applied what we get out of that, if that would maybe somehow shift the experiences that people have and take some of the pressure off of us to figure out what good looks like when we rely on the people that are going through it to tell us, hey, what is it that you missed? What do you feel like you had? How could this have been better?
Right. Well, I'm going to be doing a pilot, so I'll be in the thick of that. And
Oh,
that's the first step, right? And so
nice.
it's sort of scary though too, because you don't know what
Yeah,
you're going to get.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I think the saving grace in that is that you're going to get some feedback for sure, for sure. And from there, you can obviously take what makes sense and what will continue to add value to what you're doing. But no, I think that was a great question, honestly, that um, we'll probably hit on more of the steps and maybe some things to consider a little later, but I appreciate the tee up on it. So going back to themes, a couple of things I heard in everyone's story or recap was around um, the importance of setting vision and really being able to articulate what you want. I know in my example, part of my challenge, even though I overcame it, I guess, was just in getting the thoughts from my mind out to someone else, because when you're not the one to execute, reality is I think we all have a tendency to treat our ideas as our babies, and you wonder, well, can someone else actually see it through? Will it be what I'm looking for? And that probably speaks to getting it perfect when reality is it's probably going to iterate. I ended up painting that wall at a later point. So who knew it would have adjusted from what it started at? Um, I think another thing that came up was just around maybe understanding where your ideas might be a little broad and you're trying to narrow them down and really get focused and be really thoughtful. Um, I know for instances like that, really getting the people that you're working with to tell you exactly what it is they need is certainly an area where you've got to lean in. But outside of that, relying on previous experiences that can help give you a bit of context in terms of what to expect, trusting your gut too, because I do think there's an element of that from an experience perspective that we should also rely on too. So, all great thoughts, great things to add, which gets us to our next question. This is around being on the receiving end of great design. Let me share my screen just so you all have it in front of you. And we can talk this one. When were you on the receiving end of great design? And I'm talking something that was stellar. Jamie, you unmuted real quick. So I don't know if you've got something, it looks like you're burning to share. So I
Well,
want you to go.
I was in these two programs, these two training programs pretty back to back. So having that giant binder of like info that
Yes.
can't be accessed. And then I attended another, it's a coaching model program that is, I just cannot believe the nth detail that they put into the support. I mean, it's supported by an app that has all these reminders, like they have videoed a ton of content. So you're watching videos, they have a weekly Q&A. I mean, it's just above and beyond anything I've seen before as far as how much you're supported. And I will tell you, like, once you see that really great design, I'm super irritated with all the people who like don't use the right avenues. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's how they've said 1,500 times. That's not what this call is about. Go to the support site. Like, I just am like, the materials are there, just read them. But anyway, they really have pumped it up as far as giving you the answers to all the questions and having the materials easily accessible and digestible. And so, yeah, stark contrast. I mean, both great concepts, both great things, but the experience so different.
I'm curious, did you have any backstory or connection to that organization before? Because I'm assuming were those two different organizations who were delivering?
Yeah, I came in fresh and randomly to both of them. It was just a recommendation from someone. I said, yeah, I'll participate. And yeah.
I wonder where they started. And kind of how they got there.
Well, and the one company, you know, they talk about having taught this stuff and been doing it for like 30 years, and what was built from the other company that's a good example, they built that in like 2 years. Like, it's at this phase in 2, I mean, it was prompted like COVID. So I'm just like,
okay,
man, that other that other company needs to bring in some designers or something. So yeah, and neither one of them, like, instructional design is not their business. Training is not their business necessarily. I mean, somewhat, but yeah.
I think that's interesting that you call out the speed at which they got there. And I think the sense of urgency that is associated with change and value creation and user experience. I go back to the restaurant example because we all eat and we have all been to a restaurant, I'm sure, at some point. And it's nothing like the sense of urgency that a good waiter or waitress has when they're coming to the table before you can ask. They've refilled your beverage, or they've brought you another basket of bread, or they're back to offer something different. And I think that experience that you talked about with that second company speaks to just the sense of urgency that a great designer has, and how that certainly impacts the end user's experience. So I think that's a good nugget right there for us all. Laura, Donna, anything you all would add in terms of being on the receiving end of great design?
The most immediate thing, it might be inappropriate, but I took logic in college because it wasn't a math class, and I struggled with math, and I'm like, logic, how hard can it be? Well, now I know how hard it is.
Oh dear.
But the professor, I'll never forget him. Like, if you've taken logic, the questions are if Abraham Lincoln will be president and the grass is blue. Well, who cares? It doesn't make any sense to me. So he got the book and he goes, I'm sorry, but you have to buy the book. And he just showed us the formulas. And rather than figure that out, apparently there was a castle full of people, and Mary had gotten, this was when herpes was the worst thing that could happen to you. Mary had gotten herpes. Who caused that? Who gave that to her? So we spent the semester running syllogisms based on doing this story. Now, as an English major, wannabe novelist, it was right up my alley because we all cared about what happened to Mary. You don't care about the color of the grass. But that's where I learned about narrative teaching. We remember stories better
Yeah.
than you remember bulleted list. And so it changed. Anytime I do a course, Josiah and I, we talked briefly about storytelling.
Yeah.
Storytelling, and that to me is the best design, and our brains are designed to hear a story in a certain way. So anyway, that's Dr. Severance. He was the best. I made an A in that class, which is
Look at
unheard of
you.
for me. Yes, I did, but it was because of him. I mean,
Wow.
he taught it in a way that somebody like me could embrace it. Same information, he just did it in a narrative format. So
Huh,
Awesome.
that's interesting. I would
Very.
love if, and I'm asking in a different question. If anyone has any resources on storytelling specifically for, leadership development, that would be cool. I'm just putting that out there, but I'll answer the question. So I go to a lot of conferences, and I really like the Work Human conference. And if you've ever been, it has kind of a neat vibe and different, a different format, different
Yeah.
stations and that kind of thing, which is cool. And one of the speakers this past year I really liked, Priya Parker, and she didn't do anything radical that I wouldn't do in a large group talk, but what I really found refreshing was she crowdsourced a lot of things in the room, in the moment. And I always try to do that in trainings where I have the elements, but I'm asking for input, which kind of relates to storytelling. And I
Yeah.
can't remember what the question was specifically she asked, but she asked a couple questions and had us share, and then debriefed it and then added to it. And it worked well in that size group rather than talk at us, right?
Mhm.
In fact, I need to go back and look at her book, because she's talking about design, really, how do
Wow.
we have dialogue?
Yeah.
And it's called The Art of Gathering. It's really good. If you're familiar.
So a couple of things that I'm hearing from the group uh, was that the reason perhaps for some of the great design and the experiences that you all had was there was a speed tied to it. So that sense of urgency we talked about earlier, that there was a storytelling element of it that probably connected with you individually as a person. And that also it was probably something visceral in terms of the feeling that it gave you. It pulled you in, it was engaging, um, it perhaps brought you joy, brought you happiness. If you had a bad experience, it might have caused you frustration, stressed you out, made you kind of be a little more disconnected. So I think that just speaks to the amount of impact that we have as, I think, stewards of design in our spaces, of those that are stewards of experience for learners, certainly, but also on a personal level, whether you're planning a party or planning a training. In that instance, you are the designer, the chief designer of that experience. So all those are really great examples of things for us to be thoughtful of, certainly as we aim to create better experiences. So one of the quotes that I came across as I was thinking about our talk tonight was around great experience being driven by great design.
Mhm.
Um, and it was a formula. It said great experience equals great design. So for those who are my sticky note or notepad people, feel free to jot it down. I think I might eventually get it framed and put up on the wall somewhere. Because to my wife, she thinks I'm either doing the most or trying to dig into every single detail. But after being with me for a while, I think she's come to appreciate how much of a difference it makes, and that the devil really is in the details. And it starts from before you even get there. Every year we plan, for example, a Friendsgiving, and we bring together um, about 30 of our closest friends. I know 30 sounds like a lot, but a lot of people have significant others, so there's that. But outside of that, we plan this experience and we start about 4 months in advance, and we are thinking about the menu and the food and uh, thinking about who might have a dietary restriction, thinking about feedback we got from the previous year. We're thinking about what type of games can we play that could rope people in. We're thinking about who should sit next to who. How can
Mhm.
we encourage conversation? We're thinking about who's going to be new here, who hasn't met people, and how we can make sure that we're going out of our way to introduce each other. We're thinking about the different skill sets and capabilities that everyone has, and how can we socialize that so that everyone now has an additional resource in the room who does something, because as a community, we all benefit from the knowledge that's in the room. And so all of that just goes to show how thoughtful we try to be before the event even takes place. And then as it even takes place, how much of that has to play out rather for it to be successful as well. So again, great experience is equal to great design. So definitely something to be thoughtful of there. Now I'm curious, since we talked about kind of our own experiences with being on the receiving end, let's go back to current challenges. And I hope maybe we can unpack a couple of areas, maybe even brainstorm with one another, um, where we might be able to spend some additional time in our own spaces to be better stewards of experiences. So how about we talk about some of our own challenges as it relates to design? Anyone have any that you want to share, or at least one to share? Maybe we can start to socialize, see what we can talk through.
Well, I'm definitely struggling with doing like I can talk to people about content, I can encourage them, I can ask
Okay.
them leading questions so that they know, because a lot of times in their mind, the content is very broad, right? And so teaching
Yeah.
them to focus, because I'm in the micro learning business, so it's about focusing, narrowing it down. But I'm trying to do a template and that's what I'm trying. I want to be able to give it to somebody. Like say if Jamie wants to do, I could give it to Jamie and
Yep.
she would have what she needs to
Yeah.
create the content that she wants.
Yeah. So I'm curious with that, and I can't remember which one of you mentioned it earlier, that maybe there's nothing new and that ideas are inspired. At the end of the day, I can bet, Donna, you've probably had an experience where you've seen a really good template. Maybe it wasn't content related specifically, but you probably saw a good template. I'm wondering, when you saw it, how did it make you feel? Was it clear? What are the elements of that that might inspire what you're working on, even if the one that you're looking for isn't out there in that perfect form? I just wonder, maybe go ahead. You were going to
Well,
say
I did
something.
find one, but it was in a spreadsheet and my brain doesn't,
Okay.
'cause I was writing courses for another large course content creator
Yeah.
platform. Anyway, they sent me, but it was all in a spreadsheet and it was
Yeah.
boxy. It was hard to read. So
Yeah.
I've printed that out. I literally have printed it out and cut all the boxes out and I've
Yep.
redone them. I have giant, y'all can come over later. We'll open some wine. You can see my board that I keep hidden, but I'm putting it there. And once
Yeah.
I'm done with that, I'll screenshot it. And
Yes.
send it to somebody on my team, our creative director, who can make it
Yes.
look pretty.
Yes.
Because I can't give everybody Post-it notes, although that's what I prefer.
Absolutely. I think you literally have stepped through. I mean, you talk about it being a challenge, but you're walking through it actually. And that to me is part of the process of anyone who is trying to solve a problem or creating experience. It's getting it on paper, getting it written down. And you took something that did not maybe make sense for you in terms of how you process information, and you're sticky noting it, you're cutting it out, you're putting it in a picture, you're screenshotting it. There is no perfect way to do it. It's to do it and to get it done. So I think that's a perfect example of using what you have to get what you need in essence, and making it work for you. And then also knowing where your comparative advantage lies and where you need to pass the baton to someone to help you execute. So no, I think that's a really, really great example there. Jamie, Laura, any?
Well, I would just say what to leave in, what to leave out, you know. I
Yeah.
can sing the song, but I have so much stuff. And so I have
Okay.
a scaffolding image of what I want.
Okay.
And I'm sort of disappointed because I've looked back at some old content that I thought was going to be usable and some stuff I've, you know, bought over the years, and some of it I just think is dated and not good. And so it can be overwhelming. It is a bit
Okay.
overwhelming. So what I'm going to do is write out all the, you know, dump it all on a piece of paper and then map it out what needs to happen. And that will make me feel better. But just there's a lot of moving parts. You know, what's the pre-work, what's the experience, what's the post-work, what are the formats? This company, it's pretty unsophisticated in
Mhm.
terms of leadership development. So we're not going to have fancy apps or
Yeah.
things like that, but we will have videos and we will have some kind of Q&A and some kind of cool, I'm going to purchase simulations and all that. So I have an idea
Yeah.
of what I want. It's just getting the iterative process going and cleaned
Yeah.
up so that it's not feeling like, ah.
Yeah. Now, with that, I'm curious, given the client you're working with, how much of that vision have they given you of here's what I want, here's what I'm looking for that you can challenge back on?
Very little. And so that's the
Okay.
bad news. So,
Okay.
so the good news is anything I do will be better
Better than what they,
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and they don't know, they really don't know
Yeah.
what they don't know.
okay.
And I've worked with them for less than a year now, but they love what I've done so far. And, you know, we're refining some things could have been better. You learn about the client, you know,
Right.
in the process. But that's sort of challenging though, too, because, you know, often you're working with instructional designers or L&D people, but I shouldn't say this on an HED call, but the quality of internal people varies widely.
Yeah.
You know, how much they know, how much they don't know. Sometimes you're better off. And the people I'm working with are very bright. So
hmm
they'll get it. They'll grok it, as we used to say, right? So
Yeah.
I'm excited about it, but I gotta the challenge for me is chunking it down. I'd rather do like Donna's saying, like I just rather think in concepts and visions, and
Yeah.
that's my jam. And
Mhm.
getting in the room and improv, that's easy for me. But you know,
Yeah.
really cutting and deciding this is essential, this is not, is I'm gonna engage help with that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think looking at those ideas that are in your head, because you talked about you've got kind of a scaffold of things and ideas going on, writing them down so you can actually see them and getting them in front of you, like you said, would probably certainly be most helpful and at least allow you to see, you know what, maybe that doesn't make sense, or maybe here's where I can lean in a little more, or you know what if I go and give all of these thoughts to the client and get their challenge on it in terms of priority and timing, and
Yeah,
that
that's what we're gonna do.
that would, yeah,
Yeah.
that would help drive certainly some of that.
Yeah, and I'll go to Donna's with her wine and her boards, she said.
Listen,
Or Post-it
that's
notes.
the way to do it. That is the way to do it. I love it. I love it. Jamie, what about you?
Or I'll go to Idaho.
Hey,
You
Even
can,
better.
right in the
might
mountains.
as well.
Well, you know, as Donna and Laura were sharing, I think I think about my board for ATD. I'm the president of our chapter, and
Yeah.
I think what I'm doing is trying to get too down in the weeds, and we need
Yeah.
to come back up. We need to chunk up to the top, and like, just as we kept saying, experience, like that's where I need to be. Like that's what I need to be thinking about, and then just getting better. You know, like Donna's like, no, I'm gonna give it to the, you know, the creative team or
To
whatnot.
delegate it.
Like,
Yeah, yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that in a couple areas of my life, like that's where it's at. I need to just stop worrying about the fine and be like, okay, how would I really articulate the experience I want people to have, right? So that somebody else could understand that, and then we can figure out what the components are of that to design that experience, right? So I think I'm in a position where in a couple things I'm involved in, it really just needs to go up higher.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Someone told me one time, you can you can teach someone how to pick a color. Like that's the easy thing, but you can't necessarily teach someone about the experience.
Mhm.
What I've learned is it's important for us to, if we can paint rather the picture of the experience we want, it's so easy to tweak the small details like the font or the color or the little details that are in it. But if the experience isn't clearly defined, to your point, Jamie, I think that's where we sometimes get locked up in the details, and you got to pull it up. So I think that's a great call out there, which kind of speaks to some of the myths that I know I've certainly encountered, but I'd say all of us, based on our experiences, have probably had some sort of connectivity to um, around design. And so wanted to just roll through three of them just to give us context on what they've probably looked like or what we've seen, so that way we can spot it and even call ourselves out in the future if we are playing any of these roles. So the first myth that typically is associated with design is it's someone else's job. Reality is, whether we are the person who's leading the experience or even if we're the recipients, it's everyone's job. As a recipient of design in general, whether it's good or bad, I owe feedback. I love a good Yelp review. I love a good survey so I can provide feedback. Just as a consumer, because I have a vested interest, especially if I'm spending resources or time in this thing, this product, this offering getting better. In the same way that as a producer or a steward of an experience, I want to make sure I'm delivering something that's high quality. So making sure that we don't divert to it being someone else's job, or that's the experience design team's thing. That's just my graphic designer. It's everyone's role and everyone's job to participate in it for it to be the best experience that it can be. As far as the second myth, it doesn't impact me. Who knew that the person who designed the shower, who might not have ever stayed at that hotel, uh, would then be part of a discussion that we were having today, where that shower that they designed that they might not have ever even used has come up as something that's been a poor experience. And in fact, it just goes to show that it does impact you, even if it's not directly. It goes back to the fact that you don't remember maybe how the sheets felt or how amazing the hotel was. You spoke to the fact that the shower was hard to work. And for someone who loves a good hotel, that would then make me think, well, is this somewhere I want to stay if I'm either in a rush or I'm trying to get my life together and I can't get the shower to work the way I want it to work? Needless to say, it's all connected and is certainly something that impacts all of us, regardless of the way it impacts us. So, last myth is that I can't do it. I love this one because I definitely felt this way when I was starting a new role and trying to work through some of the challenges and some of the things that just were not clear, and feeling like I'm building the plane while I'm flying it at the same time. You've all probably heard that reference.
Yeah,
Or
it's my life, Josiah.
listen, right. Or even on a personal note, when I said, you know what, I'm going to build this entryway and design it with these kind of shadow boxes. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. No clue. So I think there's a bit of intentional risk taking that you will have to take, leaning into being a designer, and saying that if you at least maybe put your mind to it, that regardless of whether you are the one to execute it, that it can be done. And that at least if you can give someone the inspiration or the vision, that it can be done. So want to make sure that we all break ourselves free from the myth that either it's someone else's job, that it does not impact us, or that we can't do it. Because the reality is, if not us, then who? Someone's got to bring that vision out, and we might as well be the ones to do it. So wanted to share that because I thought that was extremely helpful and valuable for us to remember as we go into our own spaces and are doing our thing. Outside of that, want to speak to how we can lead the way and kind of model what good looks like as we think about design. We've talked about our own examples of what great design looks like. We've talked about poor design. We've talked about the role of a designer and how, quite frankly, every one of us is, whether we walk in that capacity or not. But how can we in our spaces take kind of that knowledge back and apply that where we are? Any ideas? Maybe let's crowdsource it a bit.
I'm sorry, can you ask the question again? Are you saying like, yeah, can you ask it again? I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Any ideas for us to take back to our clients or our chapters about how we can be better designers? So how can we model the way, in essence?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is remembering the experience. What experience I want them to have, what experience I want them to convey. If the experience is good, then I've done, they're going to receive the information, they'll be engaged, they're whatever it is that they paid money for or want, they got what they came from. And I just don't want to, I never forget my audience, but I do sometimes forget the experience. So us today talking about like your restaurant thing, the experience wasn't good. So they didn't take care of that.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's helpful.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I kind of was going back to experience, and I don't know that we always think about it, right? I mean, it feels so easy to just pick fonts or colors or structure or whatever when there's something that drives that. And quite honestly, if you give them a great experience, they're not going to care if you use this font over this
Right.
font. Could it contribute to it? Yeah, absolutely. But like in the end, if you start from that. So, I mean, I know that's like the biggest note I've taken, and that's what I'm going to take to the couple things I'm involved in is like, okay, what's the experience we want and work from that. Like, I just think maybe we just get into the details too fast.
Yeah.
Probably because, like Laura, she's got all this content, right? Like I'm totally victim to that. Like, oh, it's already there. Let me just pull that, right?
Yeah.
But then it's not going to have that seamlessness, that flow that we were talking about was so valuable earlier. So going back to experience, I agree with Donna.
Well, and I like the storytelling thread. I got to think about that more. And I do make everything very experiential, but I think case studies don't quite cut it. I got to think through what's a good way to incorporate stories. I'm just thinking out loud.
I was thinking about it, Laura, when she had said when Donna was talking about and I've built and participated in lots of leadership development programs. And I'm like, man, wouldn't it be kind of cool if you set it up and it was like, let's meet Bob, right? Bob's a brand new manager, right? Because it always starts with some foundational stuff about being a leader. Like, oh man, and then Bob had this new employee with this issue, right? So then it's like goes to coaching. Yeah. Like, I was like, man, what if we tied it together? Like, I've never done that. That just was a thought that came up as
kind of like an avatar in a way. I've done that a little bit in like bits and pieces, but it would be kind of interesting to see if you could thread that I don't know, as a, through line kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Hi,
I
everyone.
Good
think that's
idea.
fair. Hey, Aretha.
I came on later into the session, but I have a quick question. And anyone, if I can ask, Josiah, are you okay with that?
Yeah, please.
It's around the experience. And my question is, to get your experience, are you going to your subject matter resources or experts to see that real life experience that they are encountering, or you're kind of creating it yourself?
I would answer that both and.
Yeah.
So when you can't
Yeah.
get your subject matter expert, then that's when you're relying on your experience or from previous encounters or things like that.
Well, it's a great question, Aretha. I think if you're too open and you ask the client, like, what do you need? Sort of like, what do you need? Or, what is your subject matter expertise? They don't even know what they know. You know what I mean? So you have to give them a framework and some guidelines and some specifics for them to fill in. Does that help? I'm not sure. That's sort of how I do it, like with a case study or with a example that they can relate to. Is that what you mean?
Somewhat. I had this vision in my head of, when someone is asking for training,
Mhm.
what are the issues or what are they encountering that would allow you to create that experience for the learners?
Give
Can
me
I,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I've been playing quiet kid in the back of the classroom, but so I'm a learning experience designer. That's my job title at my company. And so I encounter this quite a bit where, you've got a subject matter expert and they're like, I want to build this course and I want you to start with all my content. And so I like to work backwards. This is called the backwards design. Josiah, you may be about to cover this, but Aretha's example made me think of this. So I like to think of when a learner leaves this class, what are the observable things that they need to be
Sure.
able to do?
Yeah.
And then based on these observable things, if I was to quiz this person or test this person, what would that test or knowledge check look like? And so when I worked in manufacturing, it was, I need people to put parts on a circuit board in the correct orientation. But in my leadership development, it's, I need them to be able to coach their employees with empathy and curiosity. So two completely different checks that you would be doing to see if this person could do it. And then based on that knowledge check, what do I want to be able to see them do? I craft my experience in their learning cycle, I'll call it, because sometimes it's one big course, sometimes it's a string of micro learning, but you then craft an experience for them that is pulling in just the relevant content and just the relevant practice activities and only what they need so that each piece feels meaningful and builds on the next one. And it's not just, here, let me open up this fire hose and spray all the content in your face. And now I want you to figure out which pieces you needed in order to achieve the task. So yeah, maybe that was too much.
No,
But
that's well said. That's
Yeah.
Very.
Thank you. I love it.
Mhm.
I was going to add something to that, Aretha, around motivation. And I think, Megan, you started to speak to this. And when I say motivation, I'm speaking to what's driving not only the need for the person who's asking for this training to be delivered, but on the end user side, what should they be able to now do? How is this motivating to them? So you talked about timing in the cycle. You talked about it being just in time. You talked about it being seamless versus leading with this is the content that we want to do. So the question maybe I'd ask is around what's driving the need for this in the first place to just help level set. Is it around just getting it done, or is it really around, well, we want them to be better at doing this for this reason, or it creates this value in this way, or it's now in this timing versus just being delivered as a check the box type of activity. So
I think that's so important. And especially if you're working with adult learners, being explicit about
Yeah.
here is
Mhm.
why we're providing this course for you and we've
Yeah.
built this experience for you, so that they're not going in with this question in the back of their mind of why am I here? I
Yeah.
don't want to be doing this because I don't see why
Right.
this matters for me. So being explicit right up front of, hey, your management has asked us to build this training because these are the things they want you to be able to do at the end of the time.
Yeah,
Right.
that's good.
Whether that's
That's really good.
competencies or capabilities or, and that should
Yeah.
be specific behaviors.
I want to go back to something, Jamie, you brought up around, you didn't say these words, but I'll use it to maybe sum up. You talked about kind of glossing over experience and maybe going straight to the details, or like the fonts and the colors versus looking at the experience overall. Want to understand maybe why is it that we tend to go there? Can we unpack that a bit? Because I think if we understand that, that might help us to, one, recognize when we do it, but also maybe understand how we can uh, potentially work ourselves out of that when we're there too.
I think the reason I do that is because it's making progress on a tangible thing,
Mm,
right?
okay.
Like I can see an output, and you know, it just that part of just digging in, right? And I just, yeah, I think it's just that tangible piece.
Okay. I think that's a interesting add. Um, certainly because it feels like I wouldn't say experience isn't tangible. I think it's
Right.
more of a long-term or delayed gratification that you have with it. But I think it's a really great call out just to kind of brace ourselves, if you will, for the realities of being a driver of experience, that it's not something that you'll probably reap the benefits of day one. It's something that you will continually have to put focus towards, and it'll be more of a longer term play.
Well, and going back to the conversations before, if you're focused on experience, I mean, it should be a long term, right? Every time you're
Yeah,
going to get feedback, and then
yeah,
are you taking timely, quick action to make the
yeah,
adjustments? If it still fit, I mean, some people are going to have their own experiences regardless,
yeah.
but as long as like it's connected to what you're hoping to have for them, yeah. So it does make sense that, maybe we just shy away from that long term because it's like, boom, I finished it, it's out, we're moving on, right? But it
Yeah.
really shouldn't be that way.
That's interesting. I'm thinking back even in my own personal experience around loving that list. I live by a notebook, and I've got OneNote and just about every other way to track things. And it just feels so good to be able to scratch that thing off the list. But then when I think about getting some feedback that I know I could have adjusted, and that quite frankly was probably simple to have adjusted, and it was tied to experience, and I'm like, darn it, I missed that. How would it have been if I would have stepped away from my to-do list and really looked broader at, all right, well, what am I actually trying to solve for? And really been more thoughtful, really maybe even involved others, gotten some challenge and some feedback on what I was doing, even went to the learner, went back to their feedback. I wonder what would that have done. So I think that's a great call out just for all of us to make sure that we don't overlook the experience.
Josiah, can I ask you a quick question? It's kind of
Please.
off topic, but I'm
Go
just
ahead.
looking at the invite, and you had a reference here to troubleshooting for trainers. Is that something you recommend, or why is that there?
That might be a typo.
No,
Where's that at?
so on the invite, on the email with the
Uh-huh.
Zoom link,
Yeah.
it has a free chapter of troubleshooting for trainers, and I wondered if that was something that you had worked with. No. Apparently.
No, I think
Okay.
that is tied to ATD. I might.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
might
I just
deflect
thought it had
to-
something to do with
Mhm.
design and maybe was worth looking at or something.
No worries, but I do think that's a good call out. I'd be happy to see what it is because I'm actually not sure. So we'll see what it is. We'll get an answer back to you. How about that?
Good.
Gotcha. Megan, you had
Yeah,
something?
I just wanted to mention what you were just saying about your own personal experience reminded me of the Stop Managing Change
Yeah.
one that you did last week or, pretty recently. And just
Yeah.
how bringing that, like you talked about in your talk about bringing that mindfulness and that compassion and empathy toward
Yeah.
yourself of noticing your own emotions around that change of, oh, dang it, I got feedback, I should have known this. But,
Yeah.
can you spin that of just all data is good data? This is
That's
interesting.
true. That's true.
This is something that got past me. I should be looking for this next time, or I,
Yeah.
could be looking for this next time. And
Yeah.
because the world changes, our businesses change, people's expectations are constantly changing. And so
Yep.
getting feedback, it takes, mindful effort to be curious and excited when you get it. But the truth of it is that feedback is opening up areas that you didn't consider before. And so it's always learning and always growth. So I think the people on this call, we're all growth mindset folks that are looking
Yeah.
to learn and change. And so feedback can be a blessing even when it doesn't feel like it.
That's
Wow.
well said. Absolutely.
Very.
Megan, what's your last name? Quit hiding.
Right.
That was really well said.
I know.
Thanks, y'all.
Megan,
She's
you
not gonna
can't
tell me what her
escape
last
the
name is.
question. What's your last name?
Oh, it's Megan Griffin. I'm with the ATD Portland or Cascadia chapter out near Portland, Oregon.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Nice.
But it's a beautiful thing that you just said, and I've gotten better. And it still it can go through your head, but you still say, oh, I should have known that, or why didn't I see that sort of thing? And so I appreciate the reminder that it's important to never take anything personally, right? And to always be curious because we
Absolutely.
need to be iteratively. Yeah.
Agreed. Definitely agreed. As someone who loves a good reminder and semi-bulleted list, I wanted to think about a couple of things that we can do. And I feel like you all have already said it, but I just tried to condense it into 3 lines of a list for what we can do in easy steps that we can immediately start to take to apply. And so let me flash them up on the
Let's
screen.
go there. I
Thought,
need easy
yes.
steps always.
Listen. All right. Here they are. 1, write it down.
Amen.
Get it out of your head and get it on paper. I love a good thought. I love a good idea, but it will only be that until it is written down. People cannot read minds, and this goes both ways. I can't read my customers' minds. I can try and anticipate, but I can't read their minds. I can't read my clients' minds. I can't even read my learners' minds per se. Neither can they read mine. So getting it written down is step 1. 2, socialize and solicit challenge. I love this one because with it, we have the opportunity to get feedback early. We have the opportunity to work with SMEs, to certainly work with clients as it makes sense, to work with other stakeholders, just to get early challenge. It's always great to try and anticipate what might happen before it actually happens. So I think it was Donna who gave the scenario around someone who was helping with their dormers and kind of mapping out what it was going to look like first before it actually happened. And I think this is a great example of what happens when
jump
you
off something.
socialize and challenge early and how much that makes a difference. Oh, so Megan had to jump off. No worries. Thanks for joining. But again, socialize and solicit challenge early, certainly before you. And lastly, execute. Now, the good thing about execution, and I think we all have experienced that in one way or another, is that it doesn't have to be us that actually builds the thing, that creates the graphic, that leads the session. But we have to, and we owe it to the person who is going to do that to give them something to work with. I think Laura, how different your scenario would have been if your client came to you and said, "Hey, here's what we think good looks like." Granted, it gives you an opportunity to just bring all your Laura goodness and expertise to them and help them go be great. But at the end of the day, if they clearly could get that vision out, or at least had an idea that you could help partner with and bring that thing out versus starting from ground zero, how much quicker could they get to where they want to be? So I think,
Well, and what I am gonna do is put together an advisory board task force.
Yeah.
These are leadership advisory board at different levels, and then the key context that I'm working with. I think when I show them my thoughts, they'll give good ads, it'll be a nice iterative process. So I'm not too worried about it because I know
Good.
this client and they're sharp, but
Yeah.
I know that if I just asked them what they wanted, it would not be helpful. It's, you
Yeah.
gotta go back and like, here's what I think, what do you
Right.
know, yeah.
Yep. No, absolutely. Definitely agreed. I know this list is not exhaustive because I know at some point there's going to probably be another version of this as you continue to go down the line, as it should be. Because when you have an idea, you're probably going to write it, get your feedback, you'll execute, you'll get some additional feedback. You'll need to write it down and literally go through this process over and over again, so much so that it becomes part of the way you just work naturally. And I
Mhm.
think it'll help us all, certainly as practitioners of this and as folks who help create experiences for others, be better at it. But it'll also hopefully help others who we work with to see the value in design and that they too also play a role. Uh, so I want to go back to one of the earlier slides where I initially had designer here. And metaphorically want to put each of our names here where it says you are. Uh, and the purpose of this is so that we all can start to see ourselves as the designer and really start to not only accept the responsibility and take the ownership, but also see the opportunity that we have as designers to really plan everything from the experience, the look, how something's going to work before it's made, before the training is ever produced, before anything ever goes live. We are those people who get to play that role by writing it down, capturing the detail. And if we're not the person to execute it, we delegate to someone else who will. But hopefully this reinforces why everyone can design. And I'd say certainly for those specifically on the call, all of us are designers. So the charge is for us to go forth in each of our spaces and look for every opportunity to be experience driven where we can. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. I've done a ton of talking. I want to just kind of have some Q&A. I mean, it can be design focused, it can be experience focused. I mean, open to just questions if we've got any, and even feedback as well.
Bye, Donna. No, it was a great reminder and fun to meet everybody. And I like the question format. I would just love great resources along these lines. I would share the Priya Parker book that I thought was really good, The Art of Gathering.
Art of
And,
gathering.
and you don't
Okay.
have to, are you sharing this replay with us?
Yeah,
You
it's
are?
gonna be
Okay.
recorded, and I'll capture a couple of resources too for us too.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
Just, I have Tiagi and I have some great accelerated learning things, but something that also reminds you that it doesn't have to be this onerous process, right? That you can.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's helpful. Will do. Jamie.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Neil, we
thank
missed you. Did you
Hi.
solve your crisis?
Right.
It required me to be professional but mean at the same time.
Oh, well, you do that well.
Yeah.
I'm glad
I've
someone
worked with
else
Neil
said it.
before. so-
I'm glad someone else said it.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Josiah.
I didn't have any questions or anything that could be changed. I'm actually just really grateful to have this insight of just really, I mean, I just was a moment ago thinking about my yard, right? Like I want to clean it up, but I really have no vision for what it would be. And when you don't have that vision, that means I'm going to spend a bunch of time doing a thing and then I'm going to fall in love with something else.
Yeah.
And then that doesn't work. So now I got to work again. So it just, such a good reminder and just put me in a much better space. To be
Well, and I
thinking
love the
about-
story reminder. And, you know, do you know Cubby's Green and Clean story? Oh, you need to look that up. That's a classic.
It's what?
So Green and Clean. So actually in his new book, Trust and Inspire, Stephen M. R. Covey, I used to teach the 7 Habits for years and years. And one of the things that's so good about the Covey training is it had some great stories, right? Anyway, the Green and Clean story is about a yard. And Stephen M. R. Covey was the kid who didn't follow his dad's vision. But the story is about raise boys, not a yard. And it's really about how a leader can communicate the vision and then somebody doesn't get it or implement it. And then the tendency is to go back to micromanage and tell them what to do. And his
Mhm.
father stayed true to the vision and the whole process. And it's quite a funny story, but it's powerful because it's visual and visceral and you can relate to it because, you know, everybody has, well, not everybody has a yard, but many people have a yard. So you could look that up if you want, Jamie, because I think it would be a cool thing for some of your trainings.
I will. Thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Well, I've got to boogie too because I have an 8 o'clock and I need to eat something and
Please go
actually
eat.
buy something to eat. So
Please.
thank you. It was
It's
lovely
been
to
a
meet
pleasure.
everybody. And
Nice talking to you, Laura.
yes, take care. Have a good
Likewise.
evening. Bye. Thank you.
Please do. Well, Jamie and Aretha, I appreciate y'all for hanging on with us, and certainly Jamie, you joining from out of town. Hopefully this is if this is your first, glad, but if not, that you'll continue to join and be part and let us know what's going on in your area too. Want to
Okay,
make sure we're
yeah.
supporting there too. Okay,
Thank you.
indeed. Aretha, did you have something?
Have a quick question for you, actually.
Run it.
I am an executor versus a
Ooh.
designer.
Okay.
And that was one of the reasons I actually signed up for the class because the title itself intrigued me.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, when you showed your designs,
Mm-hmm.
you showed the first one,
Mm-hmm.
but you said you called in your brother-in-law to help.
Yeah.
But then the second, the entryway, you
Mhm.
actually design yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get motivated after seeing him design the first, the wall? Was it the wall? Am I saying it correctly?
Yeah, it was a wall.
Okay, so after having your brother-in-law do the wall, were
Mhm.
you more motivated to design the entryway yourself? Or I'm just trying,
Yeah,
because
no,
I know I'm an executor. I'm not
Yeah.
the
So I've got a very transparent answer for you. My motivation was not because I absolutely wanted to do it. I was thinking about the reality that my brother-in-law did not have the bandwidth to come down, so he was not an option. 2, I was thinking about the fact that just a couple weeks prior, my wife had given birth to our daughter, and that I wasn't going to be, thank you, I wasn't going to be able to have a ton of people in the house kind of doing stuff. So thinking about that, that really limited my options and left me as the only viable option to pull it together. And the same process I went through before of looking at inspiration, I went to Pinterest, I went to
Okay.
Google, because reality is it had been done. I think there was someone on the call who had talked about a checklist that they were trying to build, or some sort of template. And the reality is templates exist, images exist. That's not the first focus wall that I've seen done, and it won't be the last. And so I started back there in the same way I did for my other wall. This time, though, knowing that I was the only one who could do it, I spent a lot more time trying to understand, well, what tools would I need if I was going to do it myself? What would the instructions look like for me to do it? And I'm someone who loves a good step by step, walk me through it, do a DIY for beginners type of thing. And so that's what I looked at, and that's what helped me step through it and kind of overcome some of that fear associated with doing something that to me seemed very daunting. So
Okay.
hopefully that helped a bit.
It does. It's excellent. That's why I wanted to ask that question,
Yeah.
because I have that fear. I can
Yeah.
look at it, but can I make mine look that way? So beautiful, beautiful work. So
And
thank
at
you.
the end of the day, yeah, at the end of the day, one other thing I noticed was that if I messed up, that's what paint is for. And at some point, I can call someone to fix it. It's not the end of the day. It's a couple of nails. It was something that was low risk. I wasn't building a house from scratch. So there is that reality that I started with something that was pretty low risk. But the reward and the return, another bit of backstory. So I told you that that was for the first house I bought. We ended up putting that house on the market and selling it. And for the buyer who purchased the house, that's the first thing that she commented on,
Awesome.
that it felt like you all put love and thought into every detail of the house.
Wow.
And she asked, who did it? And I was like, well, I ended up doing it myself. And she was like, well, do you do this? I was like, no, it's not my thing, nor will it be. But
You say that now.
listen, no, sir. It was encouragement, though, for me in terms of thinking about how that one thing and me being courageous and overcoming a fear there now gets to create an experience for someone else and becomes a storytelling piece in her new home, that I had no idea that I was even creating an experience for someone in the future too. So
Wow. Wow.
yeah,
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
indeed. I think the only other thought I can leave y'all with is go get them, go design. You can do it. So motivate someone else, tell someone else, share their stories. Again, I will be sure to get the presentation out to y'all. We'll get a recording out, and we'll capture a couple of links that might be helpful to per Laura's request. So more to come there. The other thing I will share in pure transparency, because I want y'all to see my humanness on this call. This past weekend, I was in Blue Ridge and ended up with a bout of food poisoning. So I was up at 4:30 this morning, going through it. But know that this call was my driver, and to be able to share with you all, hopefully you couldn't tell what was going on behind the scenes, but this call has energized me, and I look forward to certainly applying even some of the things that I heard on the call with you all. So thanks for letting me share.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you. I really enjoyed it. So I appreciate it. And I'm glad to hear you're well enough to at least be on the call.
Woo!
Yes.
Much better, much better. We're doing it. So, but look, y'all get back to y'all's evenings, go
Yeah.
eat dinner and enjoy. Hope to catch up soon, and again, see all the great things y'all
All right.
accomplish. Okay.
Yes.
Good night.
Good night, Jamie and
Bye.
Aretha.
Night.
Good
See
night.
y'all.